In any high school ecosystem, there are those who thrive and those who are entirely invisible. Aryan was a 17-year-old student who existed on the extreme margins, standing completely still while the chaos of the hallway rushed right past him. His daily reality consisted of small, consistent humiliations. Classmates stuck chewing gum to his chair, emptied trash into his bag, and used lunch breaks as an opportunity to mock his silence. His only connection to the student body was Ria, the person he believed was his genuine friend. That connection dissolved during a school party. In front of a crowded room, Ria admitted she only spent time with Aryan because she felt sorry for him. The room reacted with immediate, loud laughter. When a person loses their last point of social safety, they don't always break down. Sometimes they simply stop feeling. They enter a state of total emotional detachment, where empathy for others ceases to exist. That night, Aryan stared at himself in his bedroom mirror and stopped crying. He replaced his grief with a quiet, focused observation of his own reflection. The next day, he returned to school without his usual nervous habits, meeting every insult with a flat, unwavering gaze. He began studying how social hierarchies actually function, focusing on the specific pressures that keep people in line. He mapped out common insecurities: the fragile ego of the bully, the guilt of the bystander, and the desperate need for public validation. He realized these insecurities are all variations of the same thing. Guilt is the fear of being caught. Ego is the fear of being seen as weak. By finding a person's specific secret or insecurity, he found their fear. Most aggressors are prepared for a physical fight or a visible emotional reaction. They are rarely equipped to handle a victim who spends his time documenting the specific mechanics of their social lives. Aryan began by observing the school's power structure, focusing on Vivaan. As a wealthy, popular student, Vivaan maintained his status by leading the mockery against those he deemed beneath him. Aryan targeted Vivaan's social standing by leaking his private messages to the entire student body. These logs showed Vivaan mocking his own friends and admitting to academic fraud, stripping away the carefully maintained image of the loyal, perfect leader. At 2 a.m., Vivaan received an anonymous text asking how it felt to be the one everyone was judging. For the first time, the student who spent his life watching others was now the one being watched, and the resulting panic kept him from showing up to class the next day. Social power relies on the perception of others. When a leader's hypocrisy is made public, their influence vanishes, leaving them isolated. By removing the most prominent figure in the school, Aryan demonstrated that the usual social protections were gone. The strategy moved beyond a single target. Aryan began releasing information that forced the rest of the student body to question their own social circles. He leaked recordings of private betrayals, evidence of cheating, and hidden academic records. Students began receiving evidence of what their closest friends really thought of them. The atmosphere in the classroom shifted. Instead of congregating in the halls, students sat at their desks in silence, looking over their shoulders and pulling their phones closer to their chests. Aryan didn't need to invent rumors. He simply forced everyone to look at the actual things they had said and done in private. Mass distrust is easy to trigger when people are forced to confront their own actions. The school didn't collapse because of a hacker. It collapsed because the students could no longer trust the version of reality they had built. The final stage of this phase focused on Ria. Aryan intended to show that her betrayal carried the same weight as Vivaan's act of bullying. Ria received an audio file of her own voice from months prior, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate Aryan. When she found Aryan and begged him to stop, he didn't look angry. He smiled with a flat, cold expression, like a clerk marking a debt as paid. He told her that while he was crying, she was laughing, and now the roles had simply reversed. When an environment teaches a person that their feelings are a tool to be used against them, that person loses the ability to care when the environment starts to suffer. During a mandatory assembly, every student's phone chimed at once. The message promised a final exposure at 3 p.m., causing the teachers to lose control of the room as students frantically checked their devices. At 3 p.m., the auditorium screen turned on. It didn't show Aryan, it showed a montage of the students themselves. It was a collection of security footage and phone recordings of people being cruel, mocking the weak, and participating in the very behavior they were now terrified of. The auditorium fell into a heavy silence. As students watched their own faces on the screen, they stopped looking for a villain in the room and began looking down at their own hands. The screen faded to black, leaving only one sentence: "Monsters are not born, they are created." Aryan's final act was forcing the school to acknowledge its own contribution to the chaos. He didn't create the toxicity, he just gathered it and gave it back to them. In the weeks following the assembly, Aryan moved away. 6 months later, he enrolled in a different school. He sat at a desk in the back of the room, kept his eyes on his notebook, and spoke only when called upon. A group of students near him began to laugh and point, whispering about his clothes and his silence. Aryan looked up and smiled at them. He began to watch the way they interacted, noting who the leaders were and who followed them. Systemic humiliation changes a person's psychological makeup. It replaces a need for connection with a need for observation and control. The most significant threats aren't usually the people who make the most noise. They are the ones who have been broken by the system and who have spent their time learning exactly how that system works so they can dismantle